Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. As promised, we had our first working meeting of the leadership team this afternoon, and we reaffirmed our commitment. We do recognize that when we work together, we can accomplish a whole lot more than independently trying to address the challenges. We have identified a couple of sites, and we will continue to identify sites that we can use for emergency shelters. Um, the Liliha Civic Center site holds great promise, we believe. It has access to the most important items that we need, and we actually found that we actually provide some services in adjacent buildings, which would really allow us to be and be able to provide access to services directly rather than have to work with the providers. We have been working and talking with providers about how we can expand in that area. All of us have been working through our budgets to see what resources we can make, additional resources we can make available once the leadership team identifies opportunities and projects that have the most promise. So I think that there was a lot accomplished in the week or so. For example, we did identify a couple of grant-in aids that are specific to providing services. One of the grants is a statewide grant. The other grant is a grant on Kauai. As we've said from the beginning, this is a challenge for all of our communities, and we need to begin to address them before they are exacerbated. So with that, any questions or comments?
Governor, in the past, there was a lot of non-involvement with the community. Have you involved the League community in your
Not yet,
decision-making?
and it is the same challenge, right? And no community wants to be, and so we definitely are just very preliminary at this point in time. We've looked at sites, we've visited several that we thought might be possible, but it certainly had issues of one type or another. The Leha site is a very large parcel. It has access to water and electricity. We had already begun some investigation for development of an office complex on that site. So, we know that there are no other long-term. As you know, legislature had suggested a Ali'i Place, and so it does give us more options. I think the most important thing for any of these sites, we are committed that it should be a short-term emergency situation, so we can get better data on the homeless people that would be at the site, and we can work to provide them the services that they need so that we can move them into permanent shelter. The objective always is to get them into a stable and permanent environment. Any of these sites that we're looking at would just be transitional and short term.
What's the thinking about Kaka'aka and where the first people would go?
Well, and this is one of those. I mean, we've talked about the next step shelter in the past, and that the next step shelter gives us the most immediate project to get increased capacity to house homeless. So that definitely is the best opportunity. We're working through what the options would be. We're looking at what would be the quickest way we can expand and take more homeless on that specific site. The Office of Hawaiian Affairs have been working with us, and they seem willing to allow some of the other leases in that area to be terminated whenever the lease is due, and then we would be able to expand that site. County and state has also been looking at, what other things we could do on that property itself to expand capacity, with tents or containers or other options. So, we are exploring all of those options. It certainly seems, when we talk about it, that the next step property would be the one that would give us increased capacity in the shortest time.
Governor, do you have a more specific date as to when the Kaka'ako sweep might happen?
Nope.
My understanding is nobody's been given the up to 7 days notice that Managing Director Awamian had mentioned. Is that still the case? Nobody's officially been told the clock started?
So Dan, one thing I really appreciate the governor, again, I want to emphasize getting us all together. I mean, we are totally committed. It's clear now after the first meeting, coming back to the second, working together and finding sites and then working together in a very collaborative way to make sure we can quickly house people. And again, we are looking thoroughly at our budgets, both on the state and the city level, to find additional monies that we could use to help house. As you've heard, the Managing Director Awamian and I have also stated that we want to begin enforcement once we have a plan. And others here ask, where they're going to be housed. If we do it in a phased way, in a bite-sized way, we're talking about maybe 15, 20 folks at a time. There is shelter space available on any given night for at least individuals. For families, it's a little bit more challenging. But as the governor stated, if we can find sites, limited space for families, this enforcement action would be phased out over a couple months, right? You wouldn't see overnight. It's going to be very difficult to move 300 people at one time. But by beginning in a limited way and making sure that once we do enforce it, the sidewalk and street remains open and clear for everyone, that will take some time. We're hoping to do that shortly. And we don't want to commit and then come back and say, we can't do it. We're working closely to decide what date that is. And it could be in the next couple of weeks. We just want to first see what we can find in terms of expanding shelter space. Something else that hasn't been asked, but I know it's on many people's mind, is this approaching storm Guillermo. The good news, it's been downgraded to a tropical storm. It continues the weekend. Our strong gusty trades are sharing the top of the storm off, and so it's slowing and getting weaker by about 10%. But we are taking it very, very seriously. We're planning for the worst and hoping for the best. We always do. And folks ask, well, what about the homeless? Because we're going to have strong gusty trades, very strong, and we're going to have some local flooding. And we know we have homeless on Kapalama Canal, although we enforce there, they continue to come back. And then, of course, in Kaka'ako. And we'll be working with the state on the plan, should it be necessary, to have those folks relocate short-term into shelter space while the worst of the storm is on our island. Now, hopefully Mauna Kea and Haleakala will tear it apart, and by the time it gets here, the damage, it won't have the same impact, but we are preparing for information to help those who are at least able to help themselves and make sure that they're sheltered safely during the brunt of the storm.
Yeah, so I do think that is one important thing that we have done at this federal, state, and city level, is we have gone through our budgets trying to see what resources are already appropriated, but more importantly, what other resources we could make available. We've been working with the legislature. Should we, once we come up with a plan and we identify projects that have the most potential for helping to relieve the homeless problem challenge, then we will have funds available to implement. So I think that's really important.
Governor, is there a cap on how much you're willing to spend?
I think it's really an issue of how many we can find places for. I think the estimated cost to home 400 at the Next Step shelter is $1.8 million. So, we have been looking at what's required. We've been looking from a program side. We've been working with the providers, trying to see what the capacities are in terms of existing contracts that are already out there, and whether they would be able to accommodate more. And then we have been talking with them about if we had additional funds available, what would the cost be?
That 1.8 million is for the cost for a year to
Yes.
house them, or?
Yes, a year to house them.
And if I could just add to that, and I think that's why this discussion that we've been having amongst the different agencies and with the different departments and the providers has been really good. It's not just about one type of solution, whether it be Next Step shelter or putting up some kind of establishment. It really is looking at multiple types of options to make sure that we look at ending homelessness, because it's not just about another shelter or putting up tents. And so working with Director Wong and many of the other providers and whatnot, it's been about looking at things like rapid rehousing. What would it take to transition someone who's been in shelter for quite some time to more towards self-sufficiency? How could we move them in that direction, freeing up then shelter space, and then moving the next set of individuals and families along that line? Again, with the real end goal of being to end homelessness for these individuals, what kind of resources would that take? And again, as you heard from Governor, it has been about calling very deeply through our budget. Fortunately, we have a very prudent governor as well, and trying to see what resources we can bring to the table immediately so that we can start to put these programs into place. But again, it's not just about one type of solution, whether it be Next Step, but it's also about how do we put a multitude of different programs in place so that the goal at the end of the day is to end homelessness in an efficient and effective manner. And as you've heard, there are a number of different things we've talked about even just today in terms of looking at things like Next Step shelter expansion, additional sites, the release of the GIAs, which have been across the state. Kauai Economic Opportunities was one, Family Promise, which helps families across the state working with our faith-based providers, and even Partners in Development, which actually was a grant to actually help others assist our homeless individuals get into housing situations. All of these things in addition, actually, even to working with his team to make sure that they expedite hiring so that they have the capacity to do the work they need to do in the homeless division. All these things have happened literally in the last 7 days. So I think it's really a credit to this administration and all of the different agencies at the federal and state level and the county level coming together.
What I've been hearing from a lot of social providers is the reason we have such a big homeless population is because the prisoners, once they get out, have nowhere to go. State hospital patients have nowhere to go. Foster care people have nowhere to go. And that would take care of 60% of the homeless population. Any plans along those lines?
You know, we are talking about lots of restructuring in state government, so I can only speak on behalf of the state. You know, we do recognize that there are many challenges that decisions made a number of years ago have created for us. You know, for example, the reduction of mental health services all across the state all just means that they show up at the emergency rooms and out on the street. So, you know, we clearly are aware that all of these things are connected, and that's the challenge, quite frankly, right? We know that there's no simple solution. The leadership team is fully aware. We are engaging state, city, and county officials to really attack it comprehensively. So yes, we are aware, and yes, we are focused on making those decisions. I just met with the Director of Public Safety last week to talk about moving forward on a facility. We also talked about the impact of justice reinvestment, you know, and the fact that, quite frankly, I mean, our biggest challenge is the jails, and we can't control what happens. You know, many of those in the jails are pretrial detainees or awaiting assessments. And it does create a strain on the jail system. So, I mean, we all are here because we know that it's not a simple solution, that everything is connected and interconnected, and actions in one area does result in unintended consequences. And so I think the challenge and the opportunity is that by working together, we can maximize the benefits and reduce the unintended consequences of any action.
Governor, if the state is able to acquire something like the Liliha Center as an emergency shelter or any other place, what makes the leadership team believe that the homeless will actually want to move into those shelters if you're able to do that?
Well, we do know that, you know, being homeless is not a crime and we can arrest them. I think the challenge and the opportunity for all of us that we all recognize is really creating a situation that the homeless will find is better than where they're at, you know, that where they're at being out on the street today in Kaka'ako or Kapalama or Market City, right? I mean, so we need to create an opportunity for them that they view as being more attractive than their current situation. And we do believe that the Liliha Civic Center has the the assets that we believe we need. We are working with the service providers to make sure that they can be able to assist us on those sites. And then we will see how successful we can be.
So the
Everything-
rules will be
everything's
similar.
interconnected. The council is talking about expanding sit-lie island-wide, and that would push people onto state land, private land. What are your thoughts on an island-wide sit-lie?
I don't, that's probably a better question for the mayor.
But I mean,
because
the state would
I-
inherit.
you know,
some of
I
I
the-
like
do
him
believe-
answering this question.
No, I do believe, and as I said, when we organized the leadership team, that this is a statewide challenge for our communities. And we need to seek and find solutions in each and every community, and they won't be the same. They'll be probably different. There'll be different providers, a different setting. We did take a quick look in a wide area, looking at potential sites. So we want to be able to queue them up outside of the immediate response to Kaka'ako. And we definitely will begin to explore those sites as we kind of proceed. The belief is that Kaka'ako is the focus, but we hope to develop a template of what kinds of things we need to look at in sites, and then work with the service providers so that we can. The question about rules, and part of the challenge is the fact that some of these people don't like the rules and living with the rules. So, it is about trying to talk with the homeless and try and understand what makes them choose not to be in a shelter of some sort. And then working with the providers and seeing if there are ways that we can have an effective program that is less restrictive, or at least responds to the most fundamental reasons that homeless people choose not to be in shelters.
Are you in favor of
Let
an
me just
island-wide
jump in
ban?
on sit-lie.
Okay.
So,
But was the government in favor of or opposed to island-wide?
I'm in favor of state, city, and county working to end homelessness, and we are committed to find the resources and establish those programs necessary.
Thank you.
Dan, I just wanted to, and I know the governor knows this too, sit-lie can withstand a constitutional challenge if it's done in a commercial setting. So sit-lie doesn't work in residential areas. We know that in the cases where it has withstood constitutional scrutiny, it's where there's business and commerce on a regular basis. And in those areas, sit-lie does work and can be defendable, and the council has implemented legislation to do exactly that. So when you talk island-wide to subdivisions, I don't think there's a proposal to do that, but I know there's a proposal to continue expanding sit-lie because we know it works. People leave in the areas where sit-lie is enforced. And of course, then we have the problems that we have, for example, in Kaka'ako. To the question about will they go, that's part of compassionate disruption. People tend to go where there's no enforcement. So in areas where the city's enforcement, in Waikiki, King Street, Baratania, Thomas Square, Ala Moana Beach Park, you don't see the same concentrations you once saw, but they tend to go in other places. So I do believe as we begin this phased enforcement and working with this interagency group, if we have places for them to go that are nice, that are attractive, that are close to the city, close to bus, close to other things, I believe that people will elect to say this is better than being moved all the time. Because as we do the phased enforcement, we will keep coming back with the roving patrols every day. So it will not be as easy for them to continue, for people to continue to stay in the same areas they are in Kaka'ako right now. And we do believe in low barriers to entry. So our Sand Island facility doesn't mean there's no rules, but we know that when you have rules, you can't bring a dog or some other issues. It's harder for folks to then move there. We want to make it easier because we know once we provide a safe, sheltered place, the providers can then work with them to help them get back on their feet again, which is the long-term solution for homelessness.
And then these shelters that are, being proposed, will there be enough room and enough space for all the people that are, currently homeless at the moment?
As we said, this is a long-term project, and there are homeless in each and every community. So we do believe that lessons learned in Kaka'ako will allow us to address the challenges in Kapalama, in Aiea, in Wahiwa as we move forward. But the real key is for us to really begin to work together to look at how we can pool resources, and then make sure that we collectively work through the enforcement issue and then hopefully encourage them to get into the transitional housing and then permanent housing.
Would the state at all be interested in the Hilo Hattie property?
We're in the process of exploring that. I mean, I don't know what the status. We would definitely look at that option and others. There are other parcels that we are looking at. It's preliminary at this point, but we will look for all options, I think.
Well, on Hilo Hattie, there was a lot of interest on our part. We submitted we asked for the information, and there's confidentiality that goes with that. At the end of the day, the lease rent was about $105 a month, $105,000 a month, which is very high. We didn't have any money in our budget. It doesn't mean that we're not interested. And at the end of the day, no one bid. There was a straw man bid. It was withdrawn when we didn't bid. And the creditor, which is a Weinberg Foundation, was the only one to bid, which is usually the case. The creditor will bid in the debt, take back the property. Now that we know Weinberg is taking it back, perhaps working with Chair Martin and also with the governor, there could be a potential to negotiate a more fair lease rent, right? It fits within Weinberg's Kuleana, taking care of those that are challenged with housing. So I think, but we now need to take some next steps. Once it gets out of bankruptcy, I think it becomes easier. As long as it's in bankruptcy, there's a lot of procedures, there's a trustee and all of that we need to deal with. But I wouldn't take Hilo Hattie's off the table forever, but I think it needs to work through the process.
If and when the homeless people are relocated in Kaka'ako and let's say they go to shelters or wherever, what is going to be done? Or is there a plan to make sure that they don't come back in a week or in a month and then rebuild that community that is there?
Well, I think that's why we need to be looking at other sites as we move around the state. We definitely would want to, and as the past practice has been, once you clear an area, then you have to be vigilant in enforcement. So we definitely would get into a process of going through and enforcing in those areas on a regular basis to ensure that it doesn't get reestablished.
And I know we talked about the storm. Can you just briefly give us an update on what's being done with Travis?
Well, we are monitoring progress of the storm. We do have and activated the emergency teams internally. So we are in constant communication with all of the mayors and the civil defense directors in each island and each county. And so we are in close contact. We are sharing information. I am considering what I need to be able to do as governor to allow us to pre-position resources. So I've been talking with Mayor Kinoy on the Big Island because it certainly would reach landfall on the Big Island first. And then we are in conversations with the mayors and civil defense directors on Maui, Oahu. Kauai doesn't seem to be affected at this point, but we are in contact with all of them. As in the past, it's a prepare for the worst and hope for the best. I think we are very prepared. We've had several conversations already as we've been tracking the storm as it approaches. And again, the state is prepared to support each county as the storm passes.
Echo what the governor said. I mean, REOC has been working through the weekend. Got a briefing this morning. Another one happened while we're having this meeting. And so we'll be working with the state and our federal counterparts to be. We've gone through this drill a lot. The important thing is that no one let their guard down. We don't need to worry. At the same time, rushing to Costco and buying every last bit of water is also equally not so smart. Think about our fellow neighbors and what we're doing, but be prepared and listen to what the governor's team has to say, and of course, each of the mayors on other counties, and be ready. And through you guys, right?
And it gets back, and we continue to reinforce that each individual and each family should take responsibility for being prepared for 7 days if the storm comes through. We would encourage you. We are in the second month of the hurricane season, and we've had 4 named storms already that we've tracked. This one is the most serious to date, but we do anticipate the forecast was for 10 storms or so. So this is the first of, we expect several that will be coming through. So I think it's in everyone's best interest to begin to prepare water and food stores so that you can survive 7 days. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.